Yeah. Andrew. Andrew. Yeah, this is what I thank you for uh, how are you? Right. Ugly. Yeah. It was so, I think the magic of quorum is that you're control, right? I mean, there's beyond that another level of control. You really set control of trying to know what the fuck's going on. And I think it's beautiful. Yeah, really special. I think. Just we've been trying to know, just roll with I had a great. It was very fun. And yeah, you did an amazing job. It was so good.
You did a good job. I wish I saw more on. I feel like, yeah.
The primary thing I did purple.
Yeah.
I had like two lines. Yeah.
It really, yeah, that shit worked on me. And obviously I do a big lift. Like
Uh,
all of that.
oh, yeah.
And then like we obviously
Our how did it feel to like about
it felt like this in a way, this was meant to like build like act totally on like take it out there, especially after right? How easily and like emphatically like even like the mushrooms were like you were unhinged. I don't think you were there to there's parts where I was like, mushrooms, this time that I have to serve.
like we're in this
We
together.
are actually in this together. And they're like, come on, let me go. Which I understand obviously happened. I think like feeling I mean, I think that like all I think it was like I was a little like but then I also felt like yeah, like you are also like
Right, right. That was like a last minute.
That was completely
Um,
and I think I don't know if Dari really, but like
Okay. Well, all right. Hello, everyone. Welcome, everyone in person. Welcome, everyone on Zoom. So excited to put this together today. You know, we have the honor of having Taylor Bruck, our county clerk here, as well as Andy Eisenson, the senior legal counsel for Chosen Family Law Center. We're going to be talking about identity documents, about how even do we negotiate that in this current, right? So I believe that we'll start with Taylor, and then we will with work.
All right. Thank you so much for hosting this, and thank you all for having me. So I'm acting county clerk Taylor Bruck. I've been there about 9 months now, and frankly, we're trying to figure out how to navigate this as well. We're getting very little guidance from the federal government about how to actually implement some of these changes, which can be good and bad. It does give us some discretion. But what I'm really interested in is hearing from you all tonight about any issues that you may have run into or problems that you do foresee. So I can speak a little bit about the passport change, as I'm sure we're all familiar with. And as of right now, we are not allowing the X marker in the gender field of passports, basically because when we send them to the state, they're getting rejected by the State Department. So all you're doing is wasting the $45 fee in our office. I talked with Andy a bit about whether or not they're getting rejected if you're changing from one gender to another. And there hasn't been any that we've received in Ulster County that have gone through the process yet. So we don't know if they're getting denied or accepted. So if anyone knows anyone that has tried that, it would be really good feedback for us to know if that works, because then we could suggest that that is an option for people. But we have no guidance on that right now, unfortunately. So I'd really like to hear if anyone has any thoughts or ideas or know folks that went through that. Regarding DMV, so part of what we do at the clerk's office also is run DMV. As of right now, you can still put whatever gender you want on your driver's license documents. Now, this gets a little confusing because there are 3 different types of driver's licenses. There's the standard license, the real ID, and the enhanced license. My fear is that the enhanced license, that's going to be the next document under attack. So that is technically a federal document because it allows you into federal buildings. And the Trump administration has already reached out to the state and said that they're coming after that one. So if you're going to renew your license, I would highly recommend the Real ID. That still allows you to get on airplanes. And what you can do is get a passport card, which is the same size as a credit card basically. And with the passport card, that will allow you to get into federal buildings. It's actually cheaper than getting the enhanced license also. But it hasn't happened yet, but that is my fear. And regarding the passports as well, we read in various press releases from the federal government that the State Department is verifying that your gender matches the gender that is on your birth certificate. But when we received the most recent passport training manual for agents, it didn't say that. So I do not know if that's actually the law or not. We're not requiring that in our office. But again, until someone tries it and it goes to the State Department and we get the results, we're not sure if that works. So we're trying to find sort of a guinea pig to test that out to see if it works. And that's really all I have. I'd really just like to hear from folks who've kind of gone through this process or anything that they've run into. I'm sure Andy has a lot more to say about it. But our office is always here for you. We're totally committed to combating this completely discriminatory agenda any way that we possibly can. We're it's making my life miserable as clerk, denying people for what I feel are their basic human rights. So I just want everyone to know that we're here for you, and anything we can do on the local level to try to circumvent some of these laws or get around them, we're going to do it. So any questions or anything, I'm going to be here all night and happy to listen and give feedback and help out if I can. So thank you all.
Thanks, Taylor. If I sit here, am I visible? Okay, so just to clarify, the reason I think that the clerk's office doesn't have information about the passport changes is because once you send them off, once they get sent off by the county clerk, whatever happens next happens directly to the applicant and doesn't come back through the clerk. So I think the question is not, has anyone gone through this process? Because I think people have been trying, but just is that information getting back to you? And I think that there's a potential for you to reach out to people that have submitted, if you're able to do that, and ask them like, what happened with this? Did you get it back with the change that you requested, or is it still pending? Because also remember that when things are normal, getting a passport renewal application or change application process takes a couple of months. And so a lot of things are still in the hopper. And in particular, right now, there was a period of time before any guidance came out where any application for a change, it seems like, was just being tossed into a pile because they didn't know what to do with it. And so a lot of stuff is stalled. And so any pending applications are likely to take longer than expected regardless. So let's break it down a little more. But before we do that, I want to get a sense from folks in the room and from folks on the chat, like what are the concerns that brought you in today? What made you decide that this was a conversation you wanted to be having tonight? What's your positionality with regard to these questions? And what are you hoping to get out of this conversation?
Hi, I'm John. So just going to share where I'm at in this process. Maybe it'll help. And so I attempted to renew in January, received a letter from the U.S. Department of State saying that I had to provide proof of my sex at birth. And so basically, like, asking for my birth certificate. I was born in Virginia. I didn't change my birth certificate because I never thought I would need to. So I learned that that Virginia, the Department of Health, their Office of Vital Records, it's relatively easy to ask for a new birth certificate. So I'm lucky in that way. I'm under the impression that many states are not that easy. So to do that, to apply for a new birth certificate, I had to get a form filled out by my doctor affirming that I had gender affirming medical treatment, and which is completely unfair to people who are not getting treated. But anyway, I was able to get that form filled out. That was easy. I had to get a copy of, these are what was requested by the Office of Vital Records in Virginia. I had to get let's see, my court order for my name change. And they also asked for like a copy of the petition for the court order from the name change. I think that's like redundant. I don't know if that's actually necessary, but anyway. So I can mail this in to the Office of Vital Records in Richmond, but I was told that it would take up to 12 weeks. On the letter from the U.S. Department of State, it said that I have 90 days to respond. So I was told, actually, the three people that I spoke to at the Office of Vital Records said that I could, with these documents, I could get it that same day, get a new birth certificate that same day. And I clarified, is it going to say amended? Is it, or is it a new birth certificate? They said it is a new birth certificate. So I'm driving down on Sunday and hoping to be there on Monday. Anyway, so that's where I'm at in my journey, in case that helps anyone else.
Yeah, I think there's something interesting to be taken from that, which is that the fact that the passport office asked for your birth certificate confirms for us that they don't have it. that this idea that they're autonomously cross-checking passport applications with birth certificates is not true. Because if they have to ask you for your birth certificate, they don't already have access to it.
I'm gonna just read that sentence just because it gave me the impression that they're running social security numbers and seeing if it gave me the impression that they do have access to that. So I'll just read what they wrote. We are unable to issue a US passport containing the sex marker you requested. The document submitted did not establish your biological sex at birth by a preponderance of evidence considered. So this preponderance of evidence, I'm assuming, is showing that my current sex marker, my passport contradicts
Your social
something that I
security.
have on record.
You haven't changed your social security?
My social security, well, there's no marker on the social security card.
It's not on the card, but it's in their record.
I actually can't remember what because I did go to the social security office to change the information, and I'm assuming that I asked for it to be, consistent with my gender. So that's a good question. I don't know.
Is there any way you can forward me that letter that you got?
Yeah, of course.
That would be super helpful.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a passport with a different gender marker?
Yes. So that's
You would have
maybe
that on
that's it.
record, I would imagine.
Yeah, and the request was to change it. But if the question is, are they cross-checking with other documents? I have seen a couple of people, young people, who change their birth certificate, change their social security, have never had a passport, and apply for their first passport with those documents they've already changed, and that has worked. If the documents are all consistent going in, and there wasn't a previous passport with a different gender marker, that has been able to work. But yeah, if you could forward that to Andy at chosenfamilylawcenter.org, I would super appreciate that.
Yeah, great. Andy.
Andy at chosenfamilylawcenter.org. Does anyone else want to share what's up for you? What's going on? Thank you.
Making sure we have audio. Okay. So let me just scroll up for a second. Okay, Martin says, I renewed in early January with a gender marker change. I got my passport back, renewed, but with my birth gender. Lex says, Martin, I've heard that even if your because has been
We see his birth certificate.
Oh, yeah, sorry. And the old one sealed and your passport, has already been corrected, that it will be uncorrected if you renew.
I've seen that happen as well,
Yeah.
that people who have in the past updated their passport to have the correct gender marker on it, and then subsequently renew without asking for any change, the passport office will autonomously revert the gender marker to what it was before.
Yep.
No, but the passport office has the records of the previous change to the passport. Yeah.
Okay. Jay says, I have an X gender marker on my passport. I'm not sure if I should try to change it or leave it. Doesn't expire till 2033. Worried about traveling and also down the line. I could mostly pass as my SAAB. Oh, okay. Thank you. I think this is if my birth certificate has been legally changed to my current gender, is that now legally sex assigned at birth? Can it even be challenged? And interrupt me if you ever want to.
Yeah, and I should say,
Okay.
none of this is legal advice, and we are in a very fast-moving situation. So any information I'm able to provide is subject to change, and it would be good for anyone who's facing these questions to consult with an attorney that they have a retainer agreement with that is representing them. If you are within CFLC, Chosen Family Law Center's like financial eligibility guidelines and catchment, that can be me, but it also doesn't have to be. To your question, hi, that is a really weird and thorny question because the federal government is trying to have this totally fabricated legal concept of like sex assigned at birth, the gender marker on your passport at the time when it was assigned, in a way that they're just sort of making that up. And so the extent to which they're going to be able to use that and rely on that kind of remains to be seen. But that's what they're doing with immigration law as well, is they're saying if you're trying to apply for a visa with a gender marker in your records other than what was on your birth certificate when it was originally issued, that constitutes material fraud.
All right, should I read the next one?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sarah says, my passport expires in 2026 and I am a musician that travels internationally regularly, and I'm very concerned that my passport's gender marker will be changed against my will, or worse, that it's revoked entirely. I changed all my documents about 10 years ago, except birth certificate, which I changed about 3 years ago. Do you have any knowledge if if passports of people who have changed their birth certificate already are being changed or rejected?
Yeah. So if you apply to renew your passport right now, having already changed the gender marker on it, they will probably revert the gender marker on your passport back to what it was pre-change, regardless of what your birth certificate says. Yeah. So I think that it is likely that if it is obvious from your new birth certificate that it is not the one, like if there's an issue date on it that is like this week, it is likely that they will not accept that. But we also know that there are individuals within the passport office that are comrades, and that are processing things. And so it is not impossible that it will work. I would say it's not likely, but it's not impossible. And so if you're already, if you already got this plan, I'm not going to tell you not to do it. But I can't guarantee that it will work. Go ahead, Marvin.
So I heard the question already asked, very similar to my own, but I didn't hear, or I didn't think I heard a direct answer about having an X gender marker on a passport and what are the options or likely outcomes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Again, everything I'm going to say is also not legal advice, and it's a weird situation we're in because the administration's not following the law anyway. But this was the first question that I asked when this happened, and the guidance that I received from the State Department was that if your passport currently has an X gender marker, it is still a valid federal document that was issued to you, and it should still be valid through the course of its life cycle. That doesn't mean that an agent at an airport or something isn't going to not believe that or do something else, but legally that should be valid through the expiration date.
That's my understanding as well, that until it expires, you have a passport. When you go to renew it, they will probably revert your gender marker. And also whether or not having X gender markers on your documentation, is a risk factor for you is going to depend on what you're trying to do with your documents. If you're trying to fly with it, if you're trying to use it to get in or out of the country, whatever you're doing with it, that's going to be a question that is very subjective to your particular life and circumstances. And from what I have seen over my own life and my career is that whether or not people like TSA agents, people like cops, people who like have power over your body and your liberty, whether or not they decide that they want to make your life more easy or more difficult depends on a nebulous cloud of factors. One of those factors is what gender marker does your document say, and how much does that line up or not with what they think they're looking at when they look at you. There are also a number of other factors, including what is your skin tone, including when they look at you, do they think this is a person who like has means or this is a person who doesn't, you know, including like, do they think that you're a citizen or not? You know, all of these things go into the individual analysis for an individual cop or border patrol agent or whatever when they're deciding whether or not they want to fuck with you. If they've decided that they do, then having consistent gender markers or having, you know, there isn't a gender marker you can have on your documentation that's going to keep that from happening, right? And if they decide that they don't, then it's less important what gender marker your documents say. Do you know what I mean? So if like the people that I have seen get through TSA just fine with an X gender marker are people who either are not visibly gender nonconforming or are visibly gender nonconforming in a way that they don't find threatening, who are white, who have TSA pre-check, so they have $80 to throw around, you know, that sort of thing. Like with those other factors in the mix, those are, you know, having an X gender marker is not going to be as much of a risk factor. Whereas if those other things are also working against you, you know, it's going to be more of a risk factor. But also if you have those other things working against you, you know, it may be that that there isn't a gender marker your documents can say that'll be fully protective. Yeah, so the question I see is, can you explain potential dangers or problems that may arise from traveling with a passport with an incorrect gender marker, meaning the passport does not match my other documents and or presentation? So again, this is going to go into that same analysis of like, what are the other factors at play? What do they see when they look at you? It is my perception that it is more important to have your documentation be consistent with each other than with your presentation. And here's why. When someone like a TSA agent or a cop is looking at more than one piece of your identity documentation, if they're looking at your passport and your driver's license together, the reason is that they want to verify that you are actually that person. And so if those documents say different things, it's not going to work. And so it is, in my understanding, more important that they say the same thing as each other. Because if you have two documents that, you know, the pictures on them maybe don't look quite like you, or the gender marker isn't what you look like, but they say the same things as each other, that's going to be a little bit, it's going to smooth your way a little bit more. It's going to be a smaller problem than if they say different things than each other.
I had read, I'm not sure where I read it, that like in that situation where you might be, where you're traveling and you have different gender markers, we were advised to carry documentation of gender affirming medical procedures, and I was just wondering if you had heard anything about that.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of analogous guidance that I have is that if you have changed your name on one of your documents, but not all of them, and you're traveling, to carry your name change order with you so that you can show the chain of custody. You know, if your driver's license says one name, your passport says another, and you have the court document that shows these two names are the same person, that's going to make it easier, you know, like I just said, to show these two documents are representing the same person. I also heard a question about the possible revocation of passports. Now, Here's where I wanna use the stickies actually. Where can I put this up? Think that. Wow. That's good. I'm gonna. Sorry about my handwriting. They actually revoke your license to practice law if your handwriting is legible. Okay. So biggest circle, stuff they could hypothetically do. Stuff in this category includes taking your passport away, coming to your house and putting a black bag over your head because they figured out you're trans, rounding us all up, making our medical care illegal, all of this stuff, right? That's sort of in the ether of like, what if, okay? But that they're not talking about. Smaller circle inside here, stuff they're talking about, right? They're talking about making the provision of gender affirming care illegal, right? They're talking about making it so that having a drag show in a public place constitutes a sex crime. They're talking about, making it a federal crime to cross borders, state borders, to receive gender affirming care. And there's stuff they're trying. There have been hundreds and hundreds of anti-trans legislative tries at the state level in the last couple of years. More than 95% of them have failed. There's a big set of stuff they're trying that does not fall into the center category, which is stuff they figure out how to pull off. Now, here's the thing about this anti-trans stuff, right? It is for show. That doesn't mean it's not impacting us, but there's like 75 of us total, right? The purpose of it is the spectacle. The purpose of it is to use us as a prop to demonstrate what they can do and what their values are. And so there is no motivation for them to fuck with us in secret, right? It needs to be public because the purpose is the public spectacle. And so all of the stuff in this widest category of stuff they could do, but they haven't done it, they're not trying it, and they're not even talking about it, now is not the time to panic about that stuff. Because if they're not talking about it, there's no point for them. It doesn't fall in the purpose of what they're doing to do it secretly. This is where I want us to focus, the stuff that is actually happening right now. Because even if we keep our eyes on stuff they're trying, if we're really compulsively tracking the anti-trans legislation that is like popping up and failing and popping up and failing, that's going to keep our focus away from the actually important stuff that's actually impacting our actual lives. And this is where we panic, right? If we're keeping our eyes on these wider out circles of like, what are they saying they're going to do to us? What are they trying to do to us? And not what they're actually doing, we're spending more time panicking than we are responding to what's actually happening, because the way that we respond to what's actually happening that's going to be functional is by building stuff for ourselves that they can't take away. And so if we're focusing on like, oh my God, what happens if they take away our ability to change our gender markers on our identity documents? We have to fight that. We have to get it back. That's a reactive stance, okay? That requires us to keep our eyes here, to listen to what they are saying and try and game out what they're going to try and try and game out what they're going to actually do. It's all reactive and it requires us to focus on them. And that's taking our eyes away from community, right? Because the thing that we actually need to be focusing on is how do we build a world for ourselves that they cannot damage, right? Because the ways that we actually show up for each other outside of the state, separate from the state, outside of like recognition by the DMV, no offense, of like who we are, like we don't need to be getting that stuff from the state, right? We get that from each other. We get that from the ways that we show up for each other, the ways that we care for each other. And that's stuff that the state can't take away from us because they can't even imagine it. So stuff like what happens if they revoke my passport? That's here. Okay, I don't want us to focus on that. Yeah.
So I am 100% with you on all that, and I was keeping my eye on the bullseye, so to speak, in terms of gender stuff until they started doing all the stuff I was worried about them doing to me, to other people in terms of green card holders and such. Like we're going beyond just people with visas. We're now going into like a whole different area of they're willing to fuck with people. So that's where my threat modeling threshold has been. And I like, can you help me recalibrate that, or am I in the right ballpark?
No, you're right. Because stuff they actually figure out how to pull off doesn't just include the stuff that's hitting you personally, right? The stuff that they are actually doing is going to start with people who are the most vulnerable and spread outward from there when they figure out what the populace will tolerate. And so I'm not suggesting that stuff like, you know, the imprisonment of Mahmoud Khalil is outside of the bullseye, right? That stuff they've figured out how to pull off. They figured that out. They're doing it. The fact that they're not doing it to like us personally yet doesn't take it out of that category.
Something, unless you wanted to address anything up there. Yeah, I was just curious and not talking about changing gender marker, that doesn't align with my birth certificate, but just changing my name for my passport. Curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, this one's still kind of an open question. Because the lack of federal guidance to the agency seems to mean that individual agents at those agencies are kind of just doing whatever they want. So I am seeing some people who are changing just their name on their passport and it goes through and it's fine. If they have previously changed their gender marker, that's getting reverted, but the name change is in some cases going through. I think that there has been a non-zero number of cases where someone goes in to change their name and presumably because the name change is such that it's visibly a trans person, that it's getting rejected. But that's not free. And so if you're trying to leave your gender marker as is and just change your name, I think that's still worth going.
Yeah, I've been curious if it would like, I mean, and there's no way to know this, but like, you know, flagging yourself, you know, as an adversary to,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, look, at the
institutional-
end of the day, we do not have a legal right to have a passport. Your passport is the property of the federal government. It does not belong to you. And so anything that we do that involves sending an actual valid passport in the mail, you have to do it with the understanding that you might not get it back or that it might come back in a different form. And that there may or may not be a legal recourse. Now, the ACLU has filed a class action lawsuit about the gender marker changes that is having a hearing about a stay on, I think, next Tuesday. And so I'm keeping my eye on that. Because it may be that a judge will put a stay on this policy. And if the judge puts a stay on this policy, we will have a little window where we may be able to change passports again until the actual ruling comes down, which, we don't know how it's going to come out. So it's possible that we will have a little reprieve during which time we may be able to actually change documents. However, that doesn't mean they won't just get reverted next time Yeah.
So with that information, I'm wondering, should I wait until after Tuesday to,
How much time is left in your 90-day window?
I think until May.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can go ahead and get the new birth certificate, but wait until after possibly Tuesday to mail it in.
I think that's a fine idea. I think probably if it gets mailed off and then there's a stay and it's being processed during the stay, I sort of doubt it will matter whether it was received before or after the stay because things move slowly. But that's kind of conjecture. So mailing it off, if there's a stay, mailing it off when you hear about the stay is a reasonable strategy. We don't know that it will work,
Right,
but
right. Yeah, I mean, all of this just seems worth trying.
Yeah.
But, so to find information about this stay, is that going to be through like the ACLU website?
yeah, if you watch the ACLU, I think NCT or whatever they're calling themselves now, A for TE,
Okay.
Advocates for Trans Equality, I think is watching that really closely.
Okay.
And so keeping an eye on their socials, I think is gonna give you the best information.
Can you? Just want to make sure.
Yeah, A for TE, the Advocates for Trans Equality, is it's the organization that and National Coalition for Trans Equality and the Trans Law Center became when they merged. So the other thing that I want to make sure is clear is that a lot of people are thinking of state and federal identity documents as being sort of unified in this, and people are like, I can't any of my identity documents. The guidance that is coming from the federal government is only impacting federal documents. So that's your passport, that's your social security number, and that's your immigration stuff. Your state level documents, your state ID, your driver's license, stuff like that, is still governed by the state. And so if it is within your threat model to have documents that say different things from each other, which is a question that only you can answer, you can still change your state level documents as you've been able to. You can still get an X on your driver's license if you want to. That's all exactly as it was, because at least for now, New York has decided that it wants to treat trans people like humans. Whether or not that remains the case indefinitely, we don't know. But you're not going to have the same level of trouble trying to change your state level documents as you are at the federal level. It just then becomes a question of whether your risk profile can tolerate having state level documents that say one thing and federal level documents that say another. Was there another question in the chat? I think I saw it go by. I heard that from where did I hear that from? I think TLC is where I got that. So if you Transgender Law Center. Yeah. I think also Aaron in the Morning has a really good legislative tracker.
There was someone in chat that wanted to speak about their situation. If you wanted, if we can do that. Okay. I just have to, I think because there would be feedback, I would have to mute us while they spoke. And it'll be coming from this. So I don't know how loud it'll be at first.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay? Um, Thanks so much for hosting this. My right now I don't have a passport. I have previously had a passport with my birth gender and my birth name, but it was expired. It was an adult passport. Right now I have a birth certificate and my social security are both listed as female. My state ID in New York is X. And so basically, I have two questions, which you kind of already answered, but um, I'm just wondering, like, I'm nervous about all the things being mismatched. As you said, like, it's safest if they match. Um, I was going to switch at my sorry, my driver's license to mail from X just for safety reasons because we fly into Florida pretty often to visit family, and I've had some bad experiences with TSA, and I was just worried about like the X moving forward and traveling. But now I'm also concerned about like having different documents and should I be updating my birth certificate and my social security through New York while I still can? Like, is it better to have it all mail or like, yeah, just any kind of guidance as to, and also should I be getting this passport now or should I be waiting because we have family international that I'm hoping to visit? Um, should I wait until some guidance comes through in case there is a chance? So, yeah, thank you for any insight.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people who have X's on their driver's license change them back. I think whether what you want to do is back pass and have all of your documents back pass, um, if that feels like the safest thing to you, I think that is it sucks that that's what we're talking about. And I do want to just like say like we're talking about this stuff pretty matter of factly because this is what I do all day. But I also just want to acknowledge like this sucks real bad. This is fucking stupid. I don't want us to be doing this. I want us to be over at Saltbox having a beer. I'm really sorry. Um, so the question about the consistency of the documents is really a question about what are the circumstances in which you use your different ID doc. So the ones that you use together the most frequently are going to be your passport and your driver's license because those are the ones you use together when you fly. Now, remember that when you're going through the TSA, the agent that looks at your passport and the agent that looks at your driver's license are not the same person. Most of the time, unless you're getting detained, no one is looking at them together. And so, you know, you're most of the time when you're using one of them, you're just using that one. As far as your social security is concerned, as someone mentioned earlier, your social security card doesn't have a gender marker on it. The only thing the social security system has a gender marker listed in your records, but it's not on the card. The only thing the gender marker in the social security records is used for is that Medicare and Medicaid pull from that. And so if you are on Medicare or Medicaid, then you may find that you're actually better off having your gender marker be your assigned at birth category, so that your Medicare or Medicaid will cover the appropriate health care for your body rather than having it be what would be correct. And then for your birth certificate, it sort of depends on the state that your birth certificate is issued by, how easy it is to change it and what you're using it for. But you know, how frequently do most people use their birth certificates? Like not that often. And so thinking about consistency, I think prioritize your driver's license and your passport. And then, you know, we're really what we're thinking about is being strategic with it, right? And part of being strategic is disconnecting your sense of self and your sense of your own identity and what you need sort of emotionally and spiritually from your interactions with the state. Because having an identity document
that says the right thing, where you can look at it and go, yep, that's correct. I am being recognized for who I am. Like, that's nice, but we don't need it, right? What we need is to get that sense of like, I am seen in who I am cared for, who I am and how I understand myself matters. We get that from each other, right? We don't get that from the state. The state is just the consolidation of legal violence, okay? So when we think about these documents and dealing with them in a way that is strategic, we're thinking about what are the places where my identity document and what it says on it could cause me either more friction or less friction. And how do I ensure that it causes me the least possible friction? The question of fraud, again, looking back at the diagram, the question of fraud is being floated, right? It is in the second circle because they are talking about using fraud, material fraud, when people are applying for immigration documents with a gender marker that doesn't match their birth certificate as assigned at birth. Whether they're actually going to try that and whether they're actually going to figure out how to pull it off still remains to be seen. And this is the other thing, right? Like a lot of what we're getting, and I'm counting the executive orders and like the tweets in the same category here, is these motherfuckers are just talking out their ass 100% of the time. They're just saying stuff. They're saying stuff about us. They're saying stuff about people who are emigrating to this country. They're saying stuff about fucking dogs and cats. Like they're just saying stuff. And so when that stuff that they're saying gets sort of filtered and filtered and funneled and funneled and funneled into actual actions, that's when we need to pay attention to it. But the executive orders are just more of them talking out their ass. An executive order by itself has no legal weight. It is not a change in the law. It's just saying stuff. And so when the executive order, for example, about passports came down, that didn't do anything until the passport office started changing its policy. And so when they make executive orders that are about like what states should do or what doctors should do, like it doesn't have legal weight until people believe that it does and start acting in accordance with it. And so that's also part of this question of like, what do we think the state is doing for us? How much do we believe what they're saying? How much do we act in accordance with what they're saying? And how much are we complying in advance? Because remember that when NYU Langone saw the executive order saying that you can't give gender affirming healthcare to young people, they were like, okay, and stop giving gender affirming healthcare to young people, like fucking cowards. They didn't have to do that. No one was making them do that. They just saw this executive order and were like, I guess we should comply with that. That's nonsense. We're not doing that, right? We're smarter than that. And so if they are trying to take something away from us, they're going to have to come and actually take it. Okay, because the stuff that they are saying is nonsense, and we can't give it more weight than it actually has. Because I got my start in domestic violence work, right? And the one thing we know about abusers, is that it is in their best interest that we believe they are way more powerful than they actually are. That's what they need from us in order for their whole system to work. And so when we think about that on this scale, the state needs us to believe that it is way more powerful than it actually is in order for its whole system to work. And so I want us to be really clear-eyed and really realistic about what all of these directives and all of this nonsense that they're saying actually does in real life. Because the more people believe that it's real and that it's meaningful and that it's law and just go ahead and comply with it without being made to, the worse off we are. I see a lot of questions in the chat. You summarize a little bit for me?
If their corrected gender marker on their birth certificate does not match what was assigned at birth, like is Medicare going to be inaccessible?
I don't think it's that Medicare is going to be inaccessible. What I have seen is that if you have changed the gender marker on your Social Security to match what is correct for you, and then you're trying to get your Medicare or Medicaid to cover stuff, healthcare that is relevant to people that they think are the gender that people with your body parts are, right? Like if I changed my gender marker to male in the social security system and then I was on Medicare and I tried to get like a histo or something, that they'd be like, "Well, but this says that you're a man. Men don't have histos," and then they don't cover it, right? So it's a problem with coverage of like body parts that are coded in particularly gendered ways related healthcare.
Could someone repeat what the relevant ACLU class action lawsuit was called? With the decision that might open a window to change passports briefly again.
I'm going to be honest, I don't remember the name of the case, but if you go and follow either like the Transgender Law Center or the ACLU itself or Advocates for Trans Equality on socials, if something happens with that, they will announce it immediately. Oh, thank you, Megan. The person in the Chosen Family Law Center account is my coworker, Megan, who I adore. Or V Trump, that's the one. Thank you. Yeah.
Just, so are you saying that with the like complying in advance, that the passport offices like complied in advance around all the passport, like all of this? There wasn't like a legal mechanism? I'm just curious, because on one hand, it's like, okay, don't comply in advance, but if like we can't tell a passport office, like that's bullshit.
Right. So we're sort of in process of figuring out more about the internal workings of how passports happen. And now we've got our man on the inside who can do a little bit of recon for us about it. But what I want to know is where the holdup is, because it seems like part of the process is that the local, like county clerk and passport office does something, and then they send it off to the Department of State, and the Department of State does something. And like, if the Department of State is processing these and rejecting them at their level, that limits how much our local offices can do. But if what's happening is that the local offices receiving no guidance but seeing the EOs are going, oh, I guess we can't process gender marker changes, and just not doing it and rejecting it at that level, that's something that we might be able to do something about.
Yeah, so basically when we get them at the local level, we process them by just making sure all the fields are filled out and everything. And then there's different processing plants throughout the country. The ones that ours generally go to, there's one in Buffalo, there's one in Massachusetts. They usually split between them. And like, it'd be really interesting. I'm actually going to talk to other county clerks around the state about this, but to start collecting data to see if we can see trends between the two. Because what like your congressional reps can do, when you come to our office, they basically just get sent to whichever one has less work at that time. But if you call like Pat Ryan's office and say, I need this pronto and I'm closer to Buffalo, he can set up an appointment at the Buffalo office. And so like your point about like what can we do if they're doing this, you might not be able to do anything, but if you worked at the passport agency, you could. And I think that's like something that like I'm looking into too, is like who are the allies that like are doing this actual work that like could help. And it's not necessarily even like breaking the law, because again, these aren't really laws. They're just like threats that a lot of people are caving to. And I don't know if that totally answers it, but it's early enough where we can start kind of gathering data now and then hopefully like going forward have more like better guidance.
Yeah, and we also know that there are people within those offices who are quietly processing stuff.
The results aren't consistent.
Exactly. And so we know that they have the discretion to be as much or as little of a comrade as they decide they want to be. And so, you know, wherever we can find those places where people are starting to defect, right? This is what Uncle Claude talked about, right? That fascism operates in the mind. And that the more we're able to serve as a wedge to crack that open, the more it starts to fall apart.
Yeah, and we're actually told that like we have a lot of discretion as government employees or like elected officials. You'll hear a lot that, oh no, sorry, we can't do this because it's the law. When really, like, we're the ones who administer the law. Like, we do have like quite a bit of discretion at DMV. If you don't have all the paperwork, like there's things called supervisory overrides where like a supervisor can show up and they can say, okay, it's actually good to go. You are who you say that you are, and we're in the clear. But a lot of people don't know that. I didn't know that until I got in this position. And you talk to other clerks, they're like, no, we actually do have discretion with X, Y, and Z. You don't need all the points of proof of your stuff. You only need this amount, and then you can do this override. It's like, oh, really? Like, should the public know about this? It's really wild.
So, I mean, the other thing is that like one of the things that is becoming increasingly apparent is that a lot of how our civil society as such functions runs on norms rather than rules. And those norms are rapidly decohering. And that means that we don't have to pay attention to them either, right? If the fascists have decided that they can do whatever they want, then so can we. So I think we were supposed to run until 8. We're a little bit past that. I got nowhere to be, and I'm happy to keep hanging out. But at some point, I think the Senate's going to kick us out, right? Oh, perfect. Great. Then let's keep fucking going. So there were a couple of people that haven't had a chance to speak yet. Is there anyone that hasn't spoken that wants to share what's going on for you? What support you need?
I'm Sin. I have, so it's like the threat modeling. I'm like, I am looking for guidance on what to do next if I have anything to do next. So what I have currently, and the same goes for my wife, Josie. We have our passports are all set, social security is all set. My regular driver's license is all set. So I guess I'm wondering like, what else should I be doing? What could I be doing? Is there something that I really should get on? And I'm looking for guidance around that. And I'm really grateful for this space because trying to look stuff up on the internet right now is not the move. It often is not, and like right now, especially, there's just a lot of fear, obviously, and like understandably. So that is my question.
Yeah, well, so there's a bunch of stuff. Once your name change is done,
Yeah.
there's a bunch of stuff that you wanted. Changing your name kind of has a long tail, right? Like
Yeah.
I changed my name more than 10 years ago, and I still sometimes get mailed to the old name.
Mhm.
And so stuff like changing your name with like all of your banks and the credit report places and like all Equifax, whatever, like all of that stuff you're gonna want to do like over time. And there's going to be a period of time where you just keep encountering like, oh, I didn't change it on my PayPal. Changing it on your PayPal is a fucking nightmare, by the way.
I think I actually managed to do that somehow.
Yeah, it's the worst. So there's going to be some stuff like that.
Okay.
Most of those places, you don't need a certified copy of your name change order. You can do it with a scan. So don't give anyone a certified copy unless they say they need it because you only have so many. The other thing, and this is where I'm going to go into a little bit of a plug for my work. So CFLC provides pro bono, which means free legal services for people who make under 250% of the federal poverty line, which is most of us. And the services that we provide, we do a lot of name change petitions, gender marker change stuff, like all of that stuff. If you need that, come talk to me and we'll onboard you as a client. We also do other types of support because for us, like recognition and having accurate identity documents is nice, but it's not the be all and end all of like what legal support our communities need to thrive. And the reason that we're called the Chosen Family Law Center is because we think of family relationships, specifically chosen family relationships, as one of the underpinnings of what allows us to live happy lives. And so when you think about the legal support necessary for that, we're thinking about things like co-parenting and cohabitation agreements. We're thinking about donor agreements if you're trying to have a kid. We're thinking about wills and advance directives, the ways in which you make sure that your agency and your identity and your relationships are respected, even if you're incapacitated, if you're ill, or if you die. All of that stuff, I think, is the next step. If you haven't got that stuff yet, like thinking about your living will, your healthcare proxy, now I know you're married, so a lot of that stuff sort of comes sort of bundled with marriage. But there are ways in which I think about marriage. Marriage is like it's like 1,200 different ways of people being connected to each other that are all bundled together. So marriage is an assumption that you want all of these things with this one person. You want to own property with them. You want to have kids with them. You want to be financially entangled with them, all together. And so it's this sort of off the rack legal connection that you actually get to tailor if you want to. And so when you do things like a co-parenting and cohabitation agreement, when you do things like a prenup or a postnup or a no-nup, and when you do things like your will and your advanced directives, you're actually tailoring the legal parts of your relationship to actually fit what your life really looks like, and the connections that are that are part of your family. Because human connection is the medium I work. And we believe at CFLC, we believe that human connection is good. Having supported and reinforced and reliable connection with the members of your chosen family is really important. And that for many of us, that's not just one person, which marriage presumes that it is. And so when you use these alternative legal documents to create and support and resource your other relationships and your agency in other ways, what you're doing is you're unhooking all of those things from just the one person so that you're able to have it set up exactly the way that's right for your family. And this is also true for all the rest of you. Like, if you don't have a will, if you don't have your living will and agency documents and appointment of agent and disposition of remains, like all of the stuff that allows your family and your loved ones to take care of you if you're sick or incapacitated, and that allows you to express your agency and share with your caretakers what your needs are if you're incapacitated or if you die. If you don't already have that stuff, let me do it for you. I know it sucks to contemplate your own mortality. We're going to get through it together. And these are questions that most of us are going to have to answer at one point or another. And it is a great kindness to your future self and your future loved ones to answer them now while everything is fine, than to leave them for your loved ones to figure out when they're also grieving you. And that's the sort of thing, these interpersonal, intrafamilial within your family unit things that, like, the state can't take away from you, right? There's nothing that they can do to say that your loved ones aren't your loved ones. There's nothing that they can do to say that we don't have each other's backs in the ways that we do. And stuff like an advanced directive, that doesn't run on federal law. That actually runs on the professional responsibility of the medical profession. They are supposed to respect what you say in your advanced directives. And if they don't, it is a professional responsibility problem for them. So I don't think, they're not, it's not impossible that, I don't know, having a living will could become illegal in some way, but like that's nowhere on this chart, right?
Right, yeah.
So these are ways that we can show up for each other and rely on each other's support that are not in danger. And that's one thing that we can do, I think, right now.
So, I mean, documents wise, I think I'm okay. I updated my birth certificate and license as soon as he got elected. And I changed everything back to an F because safety wise, F makes sense. But I'm wondering like if there's any room for concern when it comes to like the medical field, like at my personal care doctor's office, I have an M in my chart. It's not consistent at every doctor, but like if there's any like legal thing that they can do if they see in my medical records, like my gender being different.
So the good news is that the gender that your doctor's office has on file is protected by a hippo. So you've got a hippopotamus protecting that, so don't even worry about it. Especially if you are one of the 98.2% of the trans people in this area that get your stuff from IFH. IFH seems pretty committed to keeping their records private. This is also an area where advocacy and community support is important because different healthcare providers are doing different things based on what they think they need to do. So from what we can see, IFH has kind of said, come at me, bro. They're not interested in sharing patients' data with anyone. They're not interested in stopping the provision of care. They're just kind of cranking ahead. Love IFH. IFH is the Institute for Family Health. It is our local comrade doctor.
And should I, because I know some people are doing this, if taking like, if you get HRT, to take gender dysphoria off of your chart. I know some people are doing that, but I know it's also HIPAA.
It's also HIPAA. I think here's the thing. Whether or not your medical records say gender dysphoria, like, is that a risk factor? That leads to the question of like, could somebody who was trying to figure out if you're trans manage to figure out if you're trans? Now, who's trying to do that in this risk analysis? Is it the federal government? Is this a scenario in which the FBI is trying to track down Kelly that works at PetSmart because they've figured out that she might have changed her gender marker? Like, that's pretty distant. And so if you're thinking about like, what are the ways that someone who wanted to figure out if I was trans might be able to figure it out? For a lot of us, going into your private medical records is probably not the most efficient way for them to do that if they wanted to, right? And so I understand that that urge to try and keep everything as secret as possible. But I think for a lot of us, the cat's kind of out of the bag. And if we end up in a scenario where we are being tracked down as individuals by the federal government on the basis of being trans and nothing else, I think we have a different problem. It's not impossible that we will end up there, but it's not currently happening. They're not currently talking about it. They haven't tried it. So I don't think we need to start responding as if that's the plan. Especially since, when you think about operational and information security, like, there's no such thing as retroactive privacy.
They're so disorganized. I highly doubt. I just wanted to mention something about the driver's license. This is something that actually is going to affect everybody. Starting May 7th, the Real ID law goes into effect. So when I mentioned there's 3 different types of driver's licenses, one has nothing on it, no little symbol. One has a little star on it. That's a Real ID. That is what you will need to get on an airplane starting May 7th. So check your IDs and see if it has that. The third one is an enhanced license that has a little flag on it. That will also allow you to get on planes. That's the one that's a federal document. That's the one that's potentially under attack. So if you have the one with a little flag on it, just keep an eye out for whether or not the administration goes after that one next. The one with the star on it, we should be good. That is just a state document. That's the one I'm recommending to people. Why you would need to go into a federal building? I mean, if you have to go into a courthouse for any reason other than you're forced to go there for like crime or something, like you wanted to sit through a proceeding, that's one thing I can think of.
Or if you're doing, immigration accompaniment or anything like that.
Yeah. Jury duty. I might get you out of jury duty.
You could use your pass.
You could use your passport. Your passport is like up here in the tier level. You can do anything with the passport. Yeah. And I just wanted to mention one thing, if I could, maybe
Please.
about like messaging that's worked for me around this. Weirdly enough, law enforcement is kind of against this because it ironically makes these identifying like documents less accurate. And the same thing happened with the green light law, where it was Republican versus Democrat. But then when we started talking to law enforcement agents, we were like, look, it makes your job more difficult if these documents do not accurately identify the person that you're talking to or the person you're looking for or something. And like that's actually been pretty bipartisan that we've gotten support, like at least talking about it, because when you talk about it from a personal standpoint, people are very strongly one way or the other. But from a government perspective, like that's been the tack I've been taking with the State Department. Like this makes my job stupid. Like this is not one of the fields that we verify when someone comes in to get a passport, and nowhere you're ever going to use your passport verifies this either. It's completely arbitrary to force people into something that they don't identify with, and it makes everyone's job harder. So if you ever do get pulled over or something and your documents don't match, I don't know. It's easy for me to say as a cis white guy, but I would tell the officer like, no, I'm forced to do this because of the federal government, but this is what I actually identify as, and that is your legal right.
I would say my advice on that is don't talk to cops. Don't talk to cops for any reason. Don't tell cops anything. But yeah, I think to your point, I say this about the NYPD, but like we are really, in a sense, protected from how evil they are by how incompetent they are. They are trying their hardest and consistently face planting. And so again, it goes back to that, like, it's necessary. Their project needs us to believe that they are more powerful and competent than they actually are. And so when we can engage with this in a clear-eyed and realistic way and pay attention to what is actually happening, which is a lot of bad stuff. I'm not trying to underplay that. But paying attention to what's actually happening over the rhetoric, I think we'll have an easier time dealing with stuff as it comes rather than being lost in the sauce about what might happen. But just as a general matter, right? We're all on the same page. We don't talk to cops. What is the answer to any question a cop asks you? I want to talk to my lawyer. I am invoking my Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, and I want to speak to my attorney. If you say it with your middle finger up, that's okay. Someone in the chat asked about that fascism quote. Yeah, I said it. I said it to Annie Rose because we were both just in a theater production in which I played this early 20th century surrealist artist who said that fascism occupies the mind. And a big part of my practice as an artist and as a person is around trying to identify the ways that we can not crack into the walls that are erected in the spirit by fascist conditioning. And that's a practice for ourselves, and it's also a practice for everybody that like sees us moving through the world, right? The more free and unafraid and powerful that we can be, the more we can let everyone who sees us operate know that they are also allowed to be free and unafraid and powerful. And so, like, humans are, at the end of the day, kind of herd animals, right? And like, how when you have like a toddler around you, if the toddler like falls down, if you're like, oh my God, no, are you okay? And you're like really worried in a way that the toddler like understands, they're like, oh, something bad happens. And then they're really upset. And if you're like, nice, wipe out, and you give them a high five, they're not upset about it, right? Like how distressing the circumstances are can be impacted by how distressing we allow them to be. And so if we take what's happening and we let it kill our spirit, that makes it worse. If we take what's happening and we say, what can they do to us, right? Like we have each other. That's actually what's important. And like we thank you, Megan. We can root into our communities, into place, into spirit, if that's part of your cosmology, right? Into the earth. And like, yeah, there's bad stuff happening. There has always been bad stuff happening in the history of there being people. There have been people being shitty to each other. And there have always been people kicking ass and thriving and living beautiful lives within that. And that's what we're going to do. There's a grand tradition of that. We're going to keep doing it. Like, as long as there have been trans people, there have been motherfuckers trying to stop there being trans people, and they have never succeeded. You think they're going to succeed now? Come on. Yeah, I think that's our time. If you want to talk to me about me being your lawyer, come over to me and I will give you, I don't think I remembered to bring business cards, but I will give you a sticky note with my phone number on it. That's